do have a person who's been shot, they think by someone who was on a motorcycle, and now they're circling the area trying to find a suspect. The neighborhood they're taking us to, they say 90% of the homicides there are drug-related. We're right on the outskirts of Juarez, so it took a while to get here. But you can see it's cordoned off and the police are investigating.
Que sea la policía investigadora y ellos podrán
decir más. So at this point, they know that they've got a man in his 30s, shot, killed, but they don't know much more. This is a pretty desolate area over here.
Journalists covering drug cartel violence work with the constant risk that they may become the next target. They take precautions to avoid the dangers that come with their work.
O cuando sale algo para el valle, procuramos siempre ir en bola, o sea, ir en pool de compañeros de otros medios, pues al menos no nos garantiza que no nos vaya a pasar algo, ¿no?
¿Te sientes seguro aquí soltero?
Pues no, la verdad no.
We met Luis Chaparro, a freelance journalist in Juarez.
Manuel, Luis, mucho gusto. Nice to meet you.
He told us many reporters in Mexico work with the fear their next story may be their last.
With young journalists in Mexico, it's not like if you up, it's nothing like if you up on a U.S. Newsroom, you know? If you up, you just get fired or something. But in Mexico, if you up, you're dead, man.
Chaparro says after one of his drug cartel stories revealed too much information, he was stopped by two men he thought were police officers.
So one night, two police cars, they just stopped me, put a big gun in my head, and they kidnapped me. They tied my hands and my feet. They put me in the back of a truck.
You must have thought they were going to kill you.
One of them wanted to take money from me. The other one just wanted to follow the orders to shoot me or whatever. They let me go. They gave me like 2 hours for $600.
Chaparro fled across the border to El Paso for a year. When he returned to Mexico, little had changed.
You still do it, though.
I think that's what you sign for when you're a journalist in Mexico.
Yeah.
I won't shut up. I don't want to sound corny, but that's what you're trying to do, a better place for your kids, you know?
So you feel like you're a target right now?
Every journalist is a target now in Mexico. They just killed my colleague Miroslava recently. Right. She was my boss for a year at Norte newspaper. She was brave, man. She was brave. I felt like that bullet was too close for me, you know, like.
Miroslava Breach was one of Mexico's leading investigative reporters. Her murder this spring sparked protests across Mexico. She was shot 8 times in her car outside her home in Chihuahua. The alleged killer, seen in this surveillance footage, left a sign on her body. It said, "For having a loose tongue."
One of the reasons we came here to Juarez is to speak to the publisher of El Norte. That's the newspaper that published some of Miroslava Breach's articles.
Bullet holes outside the newsroom wall remind those inside of the cartel's power to silence journalists. After losing the paper's biggest advertiser, followed by Miroslava's murder, El Norte's owner, Oscar Cantu, stopped daily publication.
Yes, she was a very, very accurate, very courageous, and very visionary.
Which was her last article?
This one.
This one here. She must have known that this was dangerous and that there would be threats for this kind of reporting.
Yeah, she must have known.
But did she tell you?
Never.
This is the last article that Miroslava wrote on the subject of crime and corruption, and it's impressive. She writes, "Bajo amenaza o otra veces por complicidad," meaning that by either threat or just being complicit, the heads of the narcos in all of these regions have essentially infiltrated local governments. And you can see why this type of reporting in an area like that would rub somebody the wrong way. Very likely this is what led to her death.
Eight journalists have been killed for their work across Mexico so far this year. Cecilio Pineda was executed in Guerrero, shot 10 times in the neck and chest while lying in a hammock. Ricardo Cabrera was shot and killed in Veracruz, walking out of a restaurant with his wife and son. Gunmen killed Maximino Rodriguez in a La Paz parking garage, shooting him with assault rifles at close range. Javier Valdez was dragged from his car in Sinaloa and shot a dozen times in broad daylight. In Jalisco, gunmen killed Jonathan Rodriguez. In Veracruz, Edwin Rivera Paz was shot dead after he fled Honduras to escape the violence there. Luciano Rivera Salgado was shot in the head in Baja California. And in Chihuahua, a memorial observing Mexico's long trail of violence now bears Miroslava Breach's name.
So this sign says, "You don't kill the truth by killing journalists."
From Juarez, we travel 200 miles south to Chihuahua City, to the state police headquarters, where the Attorney General is leading the investigation into Miroslava's murder.
So we've made our way into this pretty secure police substation where we're supposed to interview the Attorney General of the state of Chihuahua. We want to find out what's being done to bring about justice, to remove the sense of impunity, that people could get away with murder, and we'll see what he has to say.
Manuel Bojorquez.
Attorney General Cesar Augusto Peniche told us the killing of journalists in Mexico has become a social problem and a priority for prosecutors across the country.
You talk about the work that's being done, but I think there's still a sense out there that you can kill a journalist and get away with it.
Citizens are worried about this kind of event. And of course, the public opinion severely criticizes the fact that in the face of journalist crimes, few cases have been resolved.
There is evidence, and there may be people to point to. Why haven't those people necessarily been arrested?
Many of the cases have been left unresolved because many prosecutors in the country don't have sufficient resources to adequately address homicide cases. We are speaking of an ineffectiveness of 90%. Well, that hurts all of us.
Miroslava's case may become one of those statistics. Despite the surveillance video showing a potential suspect, 5 months after her murder, no arrests have been made. To address the violence and unsolved killings of journalists, Mexico created a special prosecutor's office and a program to provide at-risk journalists with police protection and other safety measures like panic buttons to alert police when a journalist is in danger. Police are currently protecting 196 journalists in Mexico. Jorge Sanchez is one of them. To meet Sanchez, we traveled to Mexico's Gulf Coast, just south of Veracruz, the Western Hemisphere's most dangerous place to be a reporter.
Te hablé por teléfono. Muchas gracias por tu tiempo.
Sanchez publishes the small investigative newspaper La Unión from his home in Medellin. This is what protection for journalists under Mexico's federal law looks like.
So they installed lighting, they installed an alarm, the cameras, fencing, barbed wire on top. What's it like to live with all of this?
Well, it's like having your own jail cell. Curiously, the ones who end up behind bars are the victims and not the criminals.
Jorge's father, Moises Sanchez, started La Unión, but 2 years ago, his reporting on cartels and corruption within the local government led to his death.
6 people entered, armed, and they asked for him. My mother was too shocked to say anything.
He was found weeks later, dismembered and decapitated. His killers still have not been found.
Do you fear for your life?
I believe this work carries risk. Many people don't talk, don't write, don't take photos, or document certain things out of fear. If we stay quiet, things are not going to change.
This summer, the Committee to Protect Journalists sent a delegation to meet with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. Carlos Lauria was CPJ's America's Program Director. He told President Peña Nieto the unsolved killings of journalists threaten a foundation of democracy in Mexico.
We are calling on him to make impunity, the resolution of these crimes, and the defense and protection of journalists a priority in the government's agenda.
Some people might think, oh, you only care about journalists because you're journalists too.
It goes way beyond that.
Why?
It's affecting fundamental human rights of all Mexicans to freedom of expression and access to information. It's impeding the possibility of Mexicans to engage in a public debate of the issues that are affecting the daily life of Mexicans, and it's affecting the stability of the Mexican democracy.
Why should anyone in the U.S. care about that?
Mexico has a long border with the U.S. This is a bilateral issue, no question about it. I think that people in the U.S. need to be more aware of what's going on in Mexico.
We get called fake news and enemy of the American people, and we can kind of brush that aside and keep doing our work. But here, it's a totally different game.
Completely different game. Completely different game. Here, you cover a sensitive story and you can get killed.